Hey guys, it's Alec Torelli, and welcome back to an episode of the Hand of the Day. My mission at Conscious Poker is really to break down poker into a simple, easy way for you to understand and help you make side income from the game. We have some awesome products and resources at consciouspoker.com, but you don't have to pay for anything. You can head over there and download my free hand reading system to improve your hand reading, which I believe is the most important skill at poker. Enter your name and email, I'll send it right over to you, and you'll be entered into subscribe to our newsletter where we send out awesome content every Monday. So let's jump into today's hand of the day. Comes from the Hustler Casino. We're playing 200, 200, 400 with a 200 ante. So replay that if you forget. And we have an awesome star-studded lineup. We got Phil Ivey, Matt Berkey, of course, Garrett Adelstein and company, and 100K buy-in. Really exciting high-stakes poker game. This is what dreams are made of. So this action kicks off with Garrett under the gun, makes it 1200 with ace king. Really nothing to say there. Super standard open, standard sizing, standard hand, and it's Garrett. That's awesome. All right, so folds over to Mikki in the small blind, who wakes up with 4-5 offsuit. Don't try this at home. He decides to make it 4K. Now, I would definitely not recommend this play from a fundamental standpoint, but it's Mikki. He's the loose, aggressive, a very in the moment type of player, and he has his plans of his own, as we'll see in a moment. Back over to Garrett, they're 300K plus deep. I like a 4-bet here. I think it makes a lot of sense. Mikki's likely to have, potentially too wide of a range, too many hands that he can be playing in this spot. You're in position, you want to beef up the pot, you want to take command and lead of the hand, so I like making a 15K raise here. Back over to Mikki, who actually calling me 11K is better in my opinion than 3-betting to 4K. The reason being, Garrett makes a 4-bet. He probably has a really strong hand, and 4-5 offsuit, frankly, is a pretty easy hand to play in a 4-bet pot. If you flop 2-pair or a great draw, or a straight or trips, you might stack him if he has aces. If not, you can just check fold your hand. Or maybe not, as we'll see in a second. Anyway, Mikki calls a little too fast for my taste, but he ends up calling and we go heads up to the flop. With a pot of 60K, the flop comes king 10-9 all hearts. You might be wondering, if you haven't seen this hand, why this is the hand of the day when he has 5 high. But Mikki had a plan of his own and he opts to lead out 15K. Again, don't try this at home, but I actually think that Mikki had a very well thought out plan, as I'll show you his thoughts in a second. Mikki's trying to represent a flush here, and he knows that even, yes, Garrett might have ace king, or maybe he has jacks or queens or even aces, but those hands are really vulnerable facing heavy action on this board. Let's think about it. You're sitting there with ace king, someone bets out, you're worried they have 2-pair, a set, a straight, or a flush. You have a bluff catcher if someone's leading into you and you have ace king on this board. So credit to Mikki because he's aware of this sort of thing. Mikki bets 15K over to Garrett, who has a very easy call. Definitely don't want to be raising here and getting 3-bet. If your opponent is bluffing, you let him keep bluffing just by calling, and if he has you beat, you play pot control. Very easy call here from Garrett. We go heads up to the turn. Turn comes a queen, which is a great card for Mikki. Mikki's much more likely at this point to have a flush or a jack in his hand than Garrett, who 4-bet preflop. If Mikki comes out firing on this turn, he could rep those hands, whereas it's pretty hard for Garrett to have those. So I actually think the tables here turn to Mikki's favor, and he comes out firing with a 20K bet. One thing I'd like here is Mikki to bet a little bit bigger, maybe something like 40K, because if you're Mikki, you really don't want Garrett to just make a crying call, and you don't want to be in a spot on the river where you have to bluff again, but you don't know where you're at. I think 40K might do the trick. Over to Garrett, who has a very tough call. I want to give Garrett major props here for even thinking about calling here, because in order to call this turn with no flush draw in your hand, you have to just put your opponent on a stone cold bluff. I mean, he has to have something like what he has in order for you to call here. You lose to 2-pair, which he probably doesn't have, or a set, but you lose to a straight, you lose to a flush. Yes, you beat a bluff, but I challenge you. Put your opponent on a bluff in this spot. How many times have you been in this spot and your opponent wakes up with 5 high, no draw? Pretty damn unlikely, which is why it's actually a good spot to bluff. So I actually think it's pretty amazing Garrett's even thinking about calling here, because he'd have to put his opponent on a complete random bluff to making a play. Garrett ends up calling, which I actually don't mind. Because it's such a small bet. I think if this bet was bigger, Garrett would probably have found a fold here. Anyway, credit to Garrett. He had the right read. He does make the call, and we go heads up to the river. With 100K in the pot, the river comes a complete blank, and here you find out what type of player you are. Do you really have the courage to fire that third barrel after your opponent calls twice with 5 high? Mikki does, which is why I think he can get away with these types of plays. Very courageous player, not afraid to put in chips, not afraid to go with his reads, and that's what makes him very dangerous. Mikki definitely had the right logic here, even when it comes down to firing 60K on the river. You can see here in his comments, he had a very well thought out plan.
I don't want to overbet because I think Garrett's the type of player that really wants to cling on to that. I think he's looking at the prize. So I was like, I don't want to over entice him to make a super donkey loose call.
Credit to Mikki here for not overbetting and betting smaller to make it look like he had a bigger hand than he does. A lot of metagame and leveling here going on, and I really love this play here from Mikki. Over to Garrett, who's really in an impossible spot. You called the flop, you called the turn, you showed strength. Does your opponent really have the courage to fire a third barrel? You only beat an absolute stone cold bluff, and it's not likely your opponent missed a draw. Your opponent 3-bet pre-flop and called a 4-bet. He probably doesn't have an offsuit ace in his hand. He doesn't have something like ace-5 with the ace of hearts. He's not going to 3-bet and call a 4-bet with that hand. So a lot of his hands are suited. All those hands make flushes. It's really hard to put him on a bluff here. Credit to Garrett for even thinking. Overall, if I'm Garrett here, I'm going to give you my exact thought process. What I'm thinking about here on this river is I'm looking at all the types of hands that I could have in my range. I'm looking at all the hands that I 4-bet pre-flop with and call the flop and turn with, and then I'm looking where ace-king fits within that range. If it's near the top, I'm probably going to have to call this off here. If it's near the bottom, I could fold and wait for a better spot because I have better hands that I can call the river with. Overall, I think Garrett has some better hands here. He could wake up with a jack here. Maybe he 4-bet with jack 10 and he has a jack in his hand. He could have a flush here. He could have 4-bet with ace-5 of hearts or smaller hearts. So I think there are some better hands that Garrett could have here to call this river. Heck, he could even have a set, which is better than ace-king. So I think that if I don't have any reads here on my opponent, look, I'm a high stakes live player as well. If I'm playing live poker and the guy bets 60,000 on the river, I'm going to look at him and see if I get some sort of read or vibe or instinct about whether or not he's bluffing. If I have that read, I'm going to trust it and go with it. But even if I have that read, it's really hard to pull the trigger and make this call. Absent of that read, I'm going to have to fall back on the theory and I'm going to go through the process I just told you. In the end, Garrett ends up folding, and I really can't blame him here. I even give him credit for calling the turn. I don't even know if I would have done that, but in the end, if I'm here on the river and I have no reads in this spot, I'm going to throw in the towel as well. Now, I hope you enjoyed this hand of the day. If you have hands you want me to review, be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Alec Torelli. DM me the timestamps in the hands of these live streams. I'll get the best hands here on this show for you. Also, I'm going to be putting out more content in the coming weeks about online poker, qualifying for the WSOP, and some collaborations that I'm doing with opportunities for you as well. So be sure to subscribe to this channel if you're not already. Turn on notifications so you don't miss them because it's going to be a first come, first serve sort of thing. I hope you enjoyed this. I want to give you guys a big thank you for your support over the months, the years, the days. I'm eternally grateful. You guys are awesome. Much love, and I'll see you next time in the hand of the day.